Okay, so welcome, and we'll add some more people as we roll through as they show up. And this is going to be a good one because we're going to go over the new changes to the contract. So I hope everybody on here knows, and those out there that don't. AAR constantly reviews all of their contract documents and puts together teams and advisory committees and all that kind of stuff to come up with better language and address little issues. And I mean, that's part of the reason why it's like 9, 10, 11 pages long. You know, it used to be 3 or 4, and then more things pop up, and we add some language in there. And as much as I like short, concise contracts, I also like contracts that protect everybody and really address the right things. You know, when it comes down to it, he who knows the contract wins. And when the contract is written well, then you can always go back to it and be like, all right, well, these are the rules that we follow, and here's how we make a happy day for everybody. And that really wins. So this most recent interaction actually came, and I'm going to share my screen to show this part right here. So this most recent update actually came out of a wanting to update the BINSR document. And after they looked at updating the BINSR document, they actually found that they needed more than just the BINSR document updated. It actually forced a few little extra things in the purchase contract. So the actual edits to the purchase contract are pretty minimal, but they needed to be done in order to echo the changes in this BINSR document. And the BINSR was really reviewed because that is the most fought about part of the contract, right? When you're going back and forth and you got timetables and you got responsibilities and you got language and you got whether it's an addendum or not, and you got, you know, all kinds of stuff. There's lots of stuff going on in there. So I expect this BINSR document and the process to be kind of beat up and re-looked at over and over and over again. Yet this last one, they really addressed a couple of things that were high on people's minds. So this is a document that came out from AAR about what they did. But the BINSR revisions are really just they did 2 main things. They addressed that they had some language in here that just said that the parties were the seller would correct the items disapproved, right? Not willing to correct, and instead they used correct or address. So they just broadened that language to allow that nobody is bound to correct a broken item. They can also address it in some other manner. And that just legally opens the door, or contractually opens the door, to be able to address it however you want, right? Whether it's actually fix the item or replace the item or give you some money or buy down your points or pay another HOA month or, you know, whatever, you know, give you the scooter that's in the backyard. They allow you to address it, right, in whatever manner that you and your the buyer and the seller deem as appropriate. The other thing that they added in there was some language around the Arizona law that mentions utilization of licensed contractors. So if any of you don't know this, understand that Arizona law states, and I'm just gonna read it straight from here. Arizona law states the requirement to utilize a licensed contractor to perform any agreed upon corrections when the aggregate contract price, including labor and materials, is $1,000 or greater, or 2, the work performed is not of a casual manner, meaning it's significant in nature, or 3, the work requires a local building permit. So if it's more than $1,000 worth of fixing, or it's significant, and I would say even if it's less than $1,000 worth of fixing, if it has to do with a gas line or even maybe you know, the electrical box or something like that, those are more significant. Or if it requires a permit. So if it does require getting an electrical box, it probably requires a permit. If it's moving a gas line, if it's fixing something, if it's actually doing something. So, and this isn't just the work. This Arizona law isn't just the work that a seller is going to do in repairing in a BINSR. It's really anything a seller needs to do to repair a house for sale. Now that doesn't mean that the seller throughout the life of their house, of their home ownership of their house, they're like, well, I need to get this $1,500 thing done and I need to get a license, so I have to get a licensed repair person. No, this is really in the addressment of selling a house. So if a seller is doing something in order to prep a house for sale, if it's over $1,000, if it's not a casual minor, or if it requires a building permit, then they need a licensed repair person, right? They need a licensed contractor to do that. And so they built it in here. So let's, this document here also addresses some normal questions. The broader scope, I just covered why they use the word address. Do they still need a price reduction, or do they still need an addendum for price reductions? Yes, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to go over these questions because I think we pretty much touch on them all the time. But I am going to go into the BINSR right now and show what the differences are. So first, you'll notice it says October 2022 at the top. So if you pull up a BINSR right now and it doesn't say October 2022, you got the wrong one. So we're up at the top right, it should say the October 2022 spot, right? Anything that's, I guess let me back up from that. Any contract that was under that's previously executed, like you already got a BINSR that started prior to October or whatever, you can continue to use the previous document. But if you're starting anything new after October 1, you need to use the new October documents. All right, so the things that they added in here, this red, buyer and seller acknowledged and agreed upon repairs must be performed in a workmanlike manner. Hey, that's nice, right? And according to Arizona law, we just went through this, and it actually states the statute and all that kind of good stuff. I know there are some people that raise their hand and say, hey, there are exceptions to that. There are I can self-repair things, exceptions to that in that actual statute, and there are. And so it's not our job to be the lawyer or to interpret the law like that, right? You could say, hey, here's the general layout of the law, and seller, if you want to push back, or you want any ideas of what you can get around, go look up ARS 32-1121 and see what those exceptions are and see if you can handle that. So it does allow for what do they call that? Just like self-repair exceptions. But it's not broad-based. It's not like I can decide to go rewire my panel by myself and get out of hiring a licensed contractor. So there you go. So those two lines are added in there. And then we added the correct or address. So we give the seller an opportunity to correct or address. And it has this little attach an addendum if applicable. That's a little reminder to let you know that the BINSR doesn't edit the contract, right? The BINSR is a notice document or a negotiation tool, right? So the BINSR doesn't actually provide an edit to the contract. So if you are doing something that is going to require an edit to the contract, a change of price, a change of concessions, whether something is or is not included in the contract or something like that, you need to write an addendum to address those actual changes to the contract. And know that any of those addendum have to go to everybody involved in the contract, which includes escrow and title and your lender. So if you start talking about dollars, the lender is going to be highly concerned, right? And they actually address it in this Q&A form. About, do I write in lieu of repairs, buyer requests $5,000, right? In that addendum, do we write that? That's a big fat no. The addendum should just simply say seller to credit buyer $5,000 at closing, right? Pretty straightforward. We don't mention the repairs in the addendum for two reasons. One, the lender doesn't need to see what is needed in repair. Right? They can't unsee that stuff, and they don't need to see that. They have thresholds of amount of money that can change hands that the seller can credit. And as long as what you're asking for sits below that threshold, they don't care what it's for, right? They don't want to care what it's for, but they can't unsee things. So if you're like, in lieu of fixing holes in roof, seller to credit buyer this, well, now the lender thinks the house should be worth less because it has holes in the roof, right? And you're going to throw up all kinds of flags, right? So don't do that. The other reason you don't want to put the repairs in the contract or in an addendum is because especially if you're asking for dollars in lieu of them, is that the repairs aren't part of the contract then, right? So if you're asking for money in lieu of the repairs, then the repairs, there's nothing about the execution or completion of repairs that is part of the contract. So we don't need to add that in an addendum. We don't need that as part of the contract at all. All right, some other little stuff that they changed down here. Whoa, went too fast. Added a little bit down here in the buyer signature. Buyer further acknowledges that if seller agrees to address the items disapproved by monetary credit or change in purchase price, an addendum must be submitted to buyer's lender, who may limit or restrict total contractual credits. Has anybody on here come across the like, oh yeah, seller's going to credit them $20,000, and you go to the lender, and the lender says, nuh-uh, you know, the maximum that maximum threshold I'm going to be able to see the seller credit is about $12,000. Or run across the, yeah, they're going to credit $20,000, but you don't have $20,000 to spend, right? So you understand any credits have to go towards credits that have to do with the cost of buying the house, not the actual house purchase. So none of that money can go in the buyer's pockets as far as down payment or paying down the loan. It's got to go towards costs like lending costs and title costs and buy down points and all of those things. It's got to actually pay for that stuff. It cannot pay for their down payment or their actual loan. So you're going to have not only lender qualified limits as far as just what's allowed, but you're also just going to have spending limits of what you can spend. So just know that in the long run, that, you know, all of that is factors of what you gotta think of when you're coming up with that number to credit from seller to buyer. All right, and then in the seller response, it added in the correct or address items. So it's not binding them to correct something, right? And this was a lot, well, if seller agrees to correct or address items disapproved, and then the top button is the same as it always has been, right? And then the middle one is unwilling or unable to correct or address, means we're not going to do anything. And then the third checkbox, seller's response to buyer's notice, is as follows: attach an addendum if applicable. So we've had a couple of different pathways that people were utilizing this in order to, when the seller just wanted to give them money. A lot of times they would check the seller is unwilling or unable, right? And then include the addendum. Well, since they've added this little clause, just these two words, or address, right? That allows the seller to address it any way possible. So not just address it as far as actually, you know, physically fixing stuff, but you can address it as far as money. So I don't want to check this second box here anymore if we are going to credit them at closing, because the credit at closing is the seller addressing those items disapproved, right? So then this middle box doesn't apply, right? So you would check the third box and identify what you're going to do, right? Check the third box and they say seller is willing to credit the buyer $5,000 at close of escrow, right? So and then you attach the addendum and sign it. And then the same thing down here, the buyer, they added this correct or address language here just to match everything else. And the buyer still gets the same thing. They get to accept it or decline it. All right. So that walked us through the BINSR. Any questions through that? Pretty straightforward. These little changes, I mean, these should not come as huge monumental shifts. They're really addressing stuff that we've probably noticed as little annoyances or problems that we've had a lot, and so they get in there and they change them. So
who interprets, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, who interprets major, like when you said that they need significant, who interprets significant in the end?
Well, so I used the word significant. Remember, the actual statute says the work to be performed is not of a casual or minor nature. So who interprets that? Well, I mean, if it comes down to it, it's going to be somebody in the legal realms that's going to interpret whether that's casual or minor in nature, right?
Like,
It's not going to be us. And I would, in my risk averse mindset, I would say if you got to ask, then you probably need a licensed contractor, right? If you're like, this is small enough, I can do this gas line from here to here. It's just, you know, pipe and some threads and stuff. Like, no, I mean, if you got to ask, if it's questionable, it's probably best to have a licensed contractor. And know that this isn't just the AAR or Arizona trying to pin it to sellers. This is really coming down to managing, protecting sellers as far as their liability, right? If they don't get a licensed contractor, then when something bad does happen, they get to shoulder 100% of that liability, right? If they hire a licensed contractor, then they say, I hired a licensed contractor, that license is going to shoulder the liability, not me. So, you know, when you start adding up all of the harm costs and punitive costs and things like that follow along with lawsuits 1, 2, 3 years later, you know, when a gas line wasn't installed correctly or a plumbing line wasn't put in right, and then, you know, water dripped down the wall for 3 years and caused mold, and then they had allergic responses and somebody had, you know, lung issues. I mean, you start getting a pretty big bill that seller who just wanted to save $1,000 by not hiring the licensed contractor, that seller ends up paying a whole lot more than the $1,000 in liability. So this is really to protect the sellers, and let them know that they should be protected. So, good question. All right. Anything else about the BINSR? No. All right. I'm going to shift over to the residential purchase contract, and we'll see. It didn't really change much. It changed mainly because of the BINSR, so it's mostly addressing those. But again, the first thing you should notice is at the top, it says October 2022. So if you're pulling up a purchase contract today or anytime after October 1st, they need to be of the October 2022 version, right? If you have a contract that was executed prior to October 1 and it's using the old contract, that's fine. But everything else should be the new one. So we're just going to scroll through here and find all the red stuff. And really, it's like they added dates and they changed some things. Dates. I'm going to keep going because I think it's just section 6. There we go. Where'd you go? There we go. Warranties. Well, we added that or address. Engage in negotiations or address repairs, improvements on premises. So they're like, we just added in that or address to open up the, to broaden the definition of what the seller has to do. And they're going to show up here shortly. Here, aren't they? There we go. So provide the seller an opportunity to correct or address, or address, or address, or address. Right. So that was it. And that is all. Right. So those are the only updates to the purchase contract. So the purchase contract really didn't change much. Biggest thing about it is that make sure you're using the newest one. As far as the actual RPC and its execution, it doesn't. You can. It didn't really change your use of it. Just make sure you're using the newest one. The BINSR is where all that edit really came from. So there we go. So that was a solid 20 minutes. I have some more time. I'd love to answer questions or talk about some things if anybody wants to. I see Gail joined us. We got Becky and I think that's Marnie listening in. So I know Marnie is on the verge of taking her real estate license test. So she's going to be full of contract knowledge before she even can execute a contract. So good job. Anybody else? Any other questions, thoughts, or anything outside of even the BINSR or these new documents that anybody has questions on?
Yes.
Go,
Can you hear
Gail.
me?
Yes.
Okay, I totally messed up and had it totally set. And right when you were done talking about the BINSR, I jumped on.
Ah,
So I got the contract, but I know you probably already addressed it. So you'll probably have a video of this so that I can go back over and see what we do, because I
am.
do a lot of credits.
I am recording this, so this will be up on my YouTube. You can go to YouTube and search me, Chris Altman, and find me, and it'll be up there on a contract conversation.
Okay,
And
good.
and to summarize, I know the other people have heard this again, but just to summarize again, really it was to open up, broaden the definition of correction and adding the or address term, so you can correct or address. The sellers allowed an opportunity to correct or address the items disapproved. And then it added in must be performed in a workmanlike manner, period, right? So put it on there. So no matter who does whatever repairs, it has to be done in a workmanlike manner. And then it added this B right here that just pointed out Arizona law, ARS 32-1121, that's about the $1,000 or greater, not of casual or minor nature, or requires a building permit. If it meets any of those requirements, then you need a licensed contractor. So it puts that in there. And then there's reminders throughout here about if there is something that changes the contract, namely price, then you need an addendum. That this document, the BINSR document, does not change the contract. And that'll take care of it. So appreciate you guys watching today. If you have any questions, always reach out to me. And we'll chat again. Thanks, bye.